Hello, I'm Doug Allison, and I'm glad to get to come before you again today. Today I'm interviewing Mike Johnson. Mike, welcome.
Thank you, Doug. Glad to be here.
Great. Most of you know Mike. He's the superintendent of the Crestwell School District. Mike, how long have you been the superintendent now?
This is finishing up my fourth year.
Whew. Time flies when you're having fun.
It does.
We started talking to each other in this way. It seems like a long time ago, but the pandemic was just at the horizon, wasn't it? It was just right there, and it's been some tough years.
Those were the dark days, for
Yes,
sure.
Yes. Now today, what we're going to talk about is the bond proposal that's coming up for election next month. I've gotten to be a part of some of the interviews that you've given, some of the sessions that you've had at the different schools, and seen that, and I have some questions myself. And
Great.
So thought I would hit you with that. Thank you for being willing to let me ask you some questions. As I understand it, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, the things that this bond, which if I'm not mistaken, is a little over $18 million for this bond. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. That it's going to involve repairs and updates of buildings and classrooms. It's secondly, to improve safety and security. Thirdly, to increase the trades classrooms or the career classrooms, increase that space, and to establish a wellness center. Do you mind elaborating on those just a little bit?
Sure. So in 2017, our district completed a facilities assessment of all of the structures throughout the district. And this was conducted with engineers and architects, and they identified over 50 areas in our facilities that were substandard or deteriorated to the point where they needed repairs. These are big projects.
Yeah.
Roofs, HVAC systems, flooring with asbestos in it, electrical systems, very important. Parking lots, our sports facilities, fields, and then they also looked at other things with safety and security and identified those areas, doors that were not standard for security. And then our intercom systems for communication, not only within our buildings, but communicating outside our buildings with emergency services and the internet and all the technology and the systems that run off of our electrical systems and such. So our intercom system is a big thing, and that's at all three schools. It needs to be upgraded at all three schools. And security cameras for the interior of the buildings, but also the property around the buildings. Some fencing, maybe to secure the properties, and the entrances to the buildings. You know, the more entrances you have to the buildings, the more opportunity there is for people to come in, intruders or folks who shouldn't be in the building during the school day or even at night. And at Crest Lane, we have over 20 entrances to that building.
Wow.
And at the high school, we have a dozen or more, maybe 15. And at the middle school, which is really up to date on security standards, I only have 3.
Yeah.
So we really need to secure Crest Lane and Crestwell High School on the perimeter much better, and with doors that are up to standard for security, and also codes. They're out of code, they're out of date. I mean, we're talking about a 75-year-old wing or half the building at Crest Lane and 56-year-old building at the high school. And 4 of the buildings on the campus, or 4 of them have not had any updates. And so we need to take a look at those. Also, with the American Disabilities Act, and to be in compliance with equal access and opportunities for all kids, we need to get up to standard in compliance with those regulations as well.
Wow. It's amazing to me that you say that the elementary school, that west wing, is 75 years. Is that right?
75 years old.
Wow. Uh, that's pretty interesting. I guess security issues were a bit different 75 years ago.
And we were a much, Crestwell was much smaller. A lot smaller.
Yes. We'll get to my selfishness right off. I've been a volunteer with the school district just about since we moved here 12 years ago. And I volunteered as one of the coaches at the middle school and worked with the high school teams and been a part of that. Then as a parent of a son that played through all the way from middle school through high school here at Crestwell. What are you going to do for the athletic facilities if this bond passes?
Well, the high school facilities are very old. I mean, they're 56 years old as the building. And, fields deteriorate too. Mm-hmm. And they have. We have sinkholes throughout the fields. We've had problems with rodents over the years, and they have their way. That's nature's way. Plus the weather. I mean, it just beats down the fields, and not being able to keep up with. Well, I don't know how you keep up with a 75 or a 55-year-old field. Sure. At some point, it needs to be completely redone, restructured, redone, and so. That's where our fields have been identified to be unsafe by the facilities assessment, by the athletics programs, by the OSAA officials who visit our fields every year, all year long. Uh-huh. And we need to make some repairs there. We need to upgrade those fields to make them safe. Yeah. And our kids, we want to take care of them. If they're getting hurt out there, we need to fix it. Yes. And at the middle school, we have a field. We have a nice field there. Yes. But the field usage has increased substantially over 50 years. We have soccer programs that we have going on at our schools, and at the high school we have youth soccer programs in our community, and all of that is pretty much headed to the middle school field. And then we have our middle school athletics programs that are there after school too. But when the sun sets, we shut down the field. So our adult recreation programs, soccer programs, they're not able to get very much time on the field at all. And our middle school kids aren't getting the time that they need on the field for their athletics programs, because our high school programs are kind of taking the priority there. Mm-hmm. But having lights on that field would open it up another hour maybe in the evening, to give some space for the adult programs, move things up, and then get our middle school kids on that field right after school when they need to be there. Mm-hmm. And then at the high school, improving that field and moving programs to that field. Maybe one of the soccer programs practices there, the other one's at the middle school in the late afternoon. And we can then share the two fields with adult programs and youth programs, and kind of spread out the wear and tear, because right now really it's mostly all of it is going on to the middle school field. Yeah. And it has served the community well. And for last 16 years. But our community has different needs now than it did then.
Okay. Wow. And some of the, as I've read the projects that go into these 4 areas that I mentioned earlier, sounds to me like that really requires a plan. And I'm sure that you have a plan in works if this bond passes. Are we going to see some things happening? If this passes next month in May, are we going to see some changes this summer?
We will, and with a lot of these projects, or the majority of them, we only have the summer months to do the work in the buildings. Yeah. If they're outside the buildings, like the fields and those facilities, we can do them through the year. But inside the buildings, with the building structure themselves, we have to focus on a 2-month schedule. But we would begin immediately this summer, and we're looking at the critical repairs and how we can get those taken care of right away. We're looking at roofs, and then we're looking at floors, removing asbestos and putting new flooring on there, and electrical systems. Our electrical systems are not up to code, and they're not in safe places. We need to secure them. All of our electrical boxes and outlets, we need to secure those. And then looking at those fields, you know, what we can do out there and get some work started there. With the high school, we'll be in a planning phase for the next year, but we're focused on the summer of 24
Okay.
to get in there and start doing some major construction on that site. And through 2026,
Wow.
we'll be looking at working on each of the buildings at the high school on the campus. And so that will be in different phases of construction. And but we'll start the planning for that over this next year and have that ready to go by the summer to get started.
That's exciting. That thrills me to hear kind of how this would work. We mentioned 18 million plus. Tell me how much this is going to cost and how that money works out. And the question that I know we all have that goes right with the cost is, how much do my taxes go up?
So this bond would not increase tax rates. Tax rates are based on assessed property values. The average assessed property value in Cresswell is $203,000. The assessed value is different than the market value. That $203,000 home that's being assessed for tax rate is not the same as the $430,000 average of a market value home. So taxes are all assessed on the assessed value of the home. There will be no tax rate increase. It'll be $1.94 per the 1,000 of assessed property value. If the bond passes, we've also been approved by the state of Oregon for an Oregon Schools Improvement Bond, and that's a matching dollars bond or grant. So the way this awesome grant works is that they will allow you the max, or they've given it to us anyway because of the condition of our schools. So they've awarded us $4 million if we pass a bond. If we don't pass the bond, then the $4 million then will be redispersed to other districts that do pass bonds. And that's how that works. So the bond, the proposed bond is $18.2 million. We get the $4 million grant if the bond passes. So we come out with $22.2 million.
Wow.
To improve our schools.
Okay. One of the questions that I've heard several times is, how can we be sure that what you're telling us the money's going to go for is actually going to be used in that manner? Tell us about the transparency of this process and just kind of how that works.
First of all, if it's not on the ballot, if it's not on the voters pamphlet listed, the bond dollars don't go there. They can only be spent on the projects that are listed on that pamphlet. And to inform the community and how we're doing, we will have periodic updates. The district will inform the public on our progress through the Parent Square and our media outlets. But we'll also have an oversight committee assigned by the school board. And the oversight committee will be making regular reports out to the public as well.
Who will be on that oversight committee?
Well, the board selects the oversight committee.
Okay. So that's going to be made up of both, I'm assuming, I'm just asking, employees of the district and community members, or how does that work?
It can be board members. It can be board members and community members. However they decide they want to comprise that committee.
Okay, so if somebody listens to this and wants to apply for that board, is that something they could do?
They can send a request to the school board.
Okay, to the school board. Wow. Okay. And then periodically you update the community, maybe through this process. If this bond passes, to keep the community aware of what you're doing and how it's going.
We can do it through blogs. We'll do it through Parent Square. I will give regular updates as I do to the design team from the strategic planning process. I send them regular updates on how we're doing with our strategic plan for improving our schools and increasing student achievement. I send those out every 3 weeks, and they get updates on how we're doing with that improvement plan. And the same would be for the bond updates.
Well, I know that in all the projects in which I've been involved with you, you've been very transparent. Everything is right out there in front of us, and that's exciting. But I do know that inflation has just taken off in the last couple of years, and that's a tough thing to deal with. Are some of your plans for upgrades, are they old enough that inflation has messed with those ideas and some of the things you have planned we were not going to be able to do? Or how do you work through what we actually can do that's on that list on the voters pamphlet?
So our estimates are within 2 months.
2 months of now. Okay.
2 months of now, and some estimates we've received in the last 3 weeks. Just a what if scenario. If this passes, we want to be sure of where we're at with the budget on these bigger items. And so we keep up to date, or we've kept up to date with the estimates. Those are current. And as far as getting into construction projects, it's when you're building a home and you get an estimate on the cost of that home, and then when you break ground, some things cost more. You make decisions based on what you need to do at the time with that construction project. And these projects are similar. There will be adjustments made throughout, but we've built in contingencies within the 22.2 million.
Yes.
So we do have a little bit of room there for inflation or any type of increased costs in labor. And the point that I would say about this is, we're looking at costs today. Current estimates on the cost for these repairs and upgrades, and what we've identified, or what the community has identified that our kids need. If we're looking at this 2 years from now, the repairs that are needed, if the repairs don't happen, then those areas that have been identified continue to deteriorate. While the cost of supplies continue to increase.
Yes.
So everything will cost more as time goes on. And so that's why we've proposed to address these issues now, to prepare our buildings for the next 15 to 20 years. Another interesting situation is the whole career and technical education program. And the shift that's happened in the last 10 years of moving from college readiness to career readiness. And there are what's called career technical standards out there now that have been adopted across 42 states. And these career technical standards are the standards that are needed for people to go right into the workforce, right out of high school. And the federal administration has just approved $200 million to go into career and technical education for that purpose. And that will be in 2024. This thing about needing people with trade skills to go into the workforce when they graduate is real. I mean, that shift has happened, and we want to be ahead of the curve on that one, and to be able to bring in programs, take advantage of these grants that are going to be offered by the federal government in the Oregon Department of Education, and expand our programs, which would mean we need more space and equipment to be able to do that, like cybersecurity.
Yes.
Or in the health occupations area, healthcare, and or emergency services, you know, and collaborating with partners. This funding that has been now directed to this career technical education and skills development is where we're going. It's out there.
Yes.
And, you know, districts that are prepared for it are going to be able to take advantage of those grants. We like to see a hub, career center, or in Crestwell that can serve multiple students in their situations. For example, our young parents, you know, and having maybe night courses, and or having other districts enroll in our programs and be able to get those that training and those skills to go out to the workforce. Thinking ahead,
Yes.
10 to 15 years, I mean, wow, you can see those things.
Well, this is a huge project. I know it's not building a new school building, but it's a huge project. Do you have a staff that's ready right now to oversee this project as it develops?
I do. We have our facility supervisor. We have a projects manager who is a general contractor. And then we have repurposed our FTE to have a grounds maintenance person to be able to keep up with the facilities. All of these, well, not all of these, but some of these positions had gone away years ago, decades ago, from funding cuts. And we've just repurposed, restructured to be able to bring them back. We can see what happens when we don't focus our attention on maintenance. And it's not that we neglected it, we just didn't have the funding. You had to prioritize, you know, things, classrooms over some of these other support services. And but we've been able to bring some things back around over the last few years.
This is a pretty phenomenal project list, I think, of all that you want to do. You mentioned an assessment back in 2017. Can you quickly go over anything that's happened since then that helped you kind of zero in on these specific needs of the school district?
So the starting point was the facilities assessment, and then in 2019 we conducted a strategic planning process, and with that is a community-wide needs assessment that includes several different surveys, community forums, meeting with community folks, a lot of data and information gathered from the community at large to come into a focus group or a committee to facilitate that and then develop a strategic plan for improving our schools and increasing student achievement. In 2019, the community identified our school facilities as a main concern, one of their main concerns. We conducted another strategic planning process in 2022 because we had completed the last identified plan by the community. We went up for a new one to develop new goals to go to higher levels. And in 2022, this past fall, the community identified facilities again as a main concern.
Yes.
In this one, however, the community requested that facilities improvement be a priority for the district. So when we look at the facilities assessment and what our community is telling us, and you know they align, well then the message is pretty clear of what we need to do. And you know my responsibility is to say, okay, I've heard you. I'm coming back to you with what I've heard, and you know we want to do the things you're asking us to do. And this is the way we can do them. People kind of have a misunderstanding or haven't been informed, you know, our state schools fund provides us funding for operations and staffing. Operations, you know, busing and supplies for classrooms, but it doesn't provide us for funding for capital improvements like roofs and asbestos removal and new flooring, and those big projects are capital improvement projects, and the state assumes that if you want to have those improvements, that your community will see the need and you go out for a bond. The state does, however, provide grants, and we've applied for a grant and been approved for it. And I spoke about it earlier. That's the awesome grant for $4 million. That's the assistance that the state gives for capital improvements.
Okay. All right, this vlog makes itself available on what we would call social media. Social media was not really a big thing 20 years ago, certainly not when the middle school or the high school or the elementary school were built. And it's gigantic, and I can, instead of having to wait till the newspaper comes out or wait till some other form of written communication, all I got to do is make a couple of clicks right here on my computer, and I can see what people are telling me. And I guess from my personal standpoint, one of the biggest things that I've heard on social media that's confusing to a lot of people is the promise that was made to people as we built the middle school that we would have a track that was appropriate. And now we only have 6 lanes, and we should have had 8 so we could have real track meets there. So we spent all that money and we can't even use it. And so that was a way that the school district didn't really tell it correctly. How would you respond to that?
Well, a couple of things. You know, when you look back in history, people can have their own perspective on history.
Yes.
You know, I don't know what happened 20 years ago exactly. I wasn't a part of the committee that made those decisions. I have done my research, though, on all of the bond projects in this community for the last 40 years. And what I would say is that regardless of what your perspective is on what happened at the middle school, or even what happened when the bond was passed for Crest Lane and the high school way back when to develop the additions that have been put on there. Our buildings, the repairs and upgrades that are needed aren't going to change wherever you're coming from your perspective. They're still going to be there. I mean, the buildings have been identified. The community has identified the facilities as a priority. When I researched the construction of the middle school, I found out two interesting things that happened there. One is, and I've heard this in the community, that they didn't have enough money to finish the school. That's why they have a room there that's not completed. And when looking back at the plans for the middle school, where this unfinished room was a void in the construction of the project. There wasn't going to be a room there, an instructional space there. But the oversight committee at the time thought that would be costly in the future to add a room to the facility in that area. So, as wise as they were at the time, and I say that genuinely, they decided that there should be a room, walls put up there, ceiling over it, and prepare it for the future when the need arises that they needed more instructional space. So we have a room there that they put there for 20 years later, and here we are, and we need the space. So I would say heads up to that committee for thinking that way. The second thing that I do hear about is the field and the track. And looking back at the planning, what that was intended for was PE classes. And anytime you go by that school, if it's not raining, PE classes are out there during the school day. Not happening at the high school. Field sports don't happen outside for PE at the high school because we don't have that type of field that has that surface that would allow that. It's just not there. So anyway, it was that field and track was built for PE classes, not for track meets. It wasn't intended to be an 8-lane track. It was intended to be a PE track.
Yes.
So that kids could get out there, walk it, and run it, and that was it. It would have been very costly to add D-zone areas on that field for long jumps, high jumps, and all those other track events. I mean, those are added expenses and space. So here we are today where our kids programs have grown. Adults are now into recreation programs, you know, sports, competitive sports, and youth programs are growing. The community has grown, and the need has grown for more activity space. And so we're looking at that. How can we make that a viable facility to assist with the needs that we have today as far as recreational activities for kids and adults.
Wow. I appreciate you giving me that explanation. You've done a great job today of informing me, and I appreciate it. I have one last question. I've noticed over these last few months, you have made yourself very accessible to the community for informational purposes. You've had 3 public forums now that I'm aware of, where you've just made yourself available. I think that's fantastic. What would you tell anybody if they have any question? How would they get that question answered right now?
Send it directly to me or to the PAC committee.
Okay.
And we can answer your questions. We have an FAQ page on our website for the bond.
Yeah.
And questions that come in from the community, we post up on that FAQ site page. That's on our bond site there.
Okay.
You're right that I've had those community meetings, and that's been there have been 3 of those. I've met with over 16 organizations within the community to talk to them, to present to them this bond proposal, and to answer questions with them. And I've given, I don't know, 12 to 15 tours of our facilities to groups of folks who have asked to take a tour and see what we're talking about.
Yes.
And then I participated in an information video to answer the questions or show the facilities to folks.
Yes.
Because that had just come up so often.
And that's available online?
That's available on our website.
Okay.
You can go in and see the video. And you know, it's been a real interesting process. I have met a lot of people in the community because of this process, and I've enjoyed getting to know them and provide this information for them. So if you have questions, let me know.
Wonderful.
And we'll get them on the FAQ page. I've answered a lot of questions at the community meetings. I appreciate the folks that were able to take the time away from their families to be there, to ask questions, to learn more. Really good questions. Every question is a smart question. And just appreciate the opportunity to explain more about this.
Okay. Again, thank you so much for letting me ask you these questions today. I want to encourage you as a person that loves our schools, loves our teachers, the way that our kids are being treated. I appreciate them so much. And I personally am in favor of this bond. And I really urge you to get all of your questions answered. And if you can at all, get out in May. I think it's the 16th is the day of election.
Yes.
And I want to urge you to vote yes for this bonded measure. Thanks for watching.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you.